This is the story of a true miraculous occurrence. In 1998, reports were coming out of Tibet that a certain Tibetan monk by the name of Khenpo Ho had manifested the controversial rainbow body phenomena. This is a phenomena that's accepted in some schools of Tibetan Buddhism, but rejected in others. And basically, what this is that for certain ascetics who have dedicated themselves to very arduous spiritual practices, they're able to manifest a dematerialization of their body after their death. And in addition to this dissolution of the body, other paranormal phenomena is also witnessed, typically of a luminous nature. Now, these reports had spread all over the world, and they eventually reached a Catholic Benedictine monk by the name of Brother David Steindl-rast, who was intrigued by the phenomena and had wondered whether there could possibly be a connection between the rainbow body phenomena of Tibet and the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. In other words, perhaps understanding this phenomena in Tibet could help us understand what happened to Jesus. So he contacted his spiritual son and friend, Father Tiso, Father Francis Tiso, who had studied Tibetan Buddhism and actually teaches Tibetan Buddhism at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. So he seemed like an ideal candidate to lead this investigation into the case of Khenpo Ho and the rainbow body phenomena. So Father Tiso happily agreed. He and several others did travel to Tibet in the year 2000 in the month of July, so literally just 2 years after this miraculous occurrence. And they managed to interview many people who had known Khenpo Ho and had actually observed the dying process. Now, Khenpo Ho was a very humble man, known to be very compassionate, and from youth he had dedicated himself to advancing himself spiritually. He had taken few disciples compared to other lamas, but he was known to be very attentive to the needs of the disciples that he did take in helping them advance spiritually as well. So he had lived in this very humble hermitage in the eastern part of Tibet, known as the Kanzi Gompa region, which is now a part of the People's Republic of China, known as the Sichuan province. So he had actually died in this very room. It is now turned into a shrine and in this box-like structure in the summer of 1998. So the witnesses that were present, and there were at least four people that were present to the dying process, and they said that he simply lied down um, in this box-like structure and began reciting mantras. And as he was reciting these mantras, his breathing became more labored and eventually stopped. Now, what was interesting is that they had said that he had no ailments, no problems, he wasn't sick, nothing was wrong with him that particular day when he had passed away. So it was unexpected when it had happened. But they noticed that when he had died, almost immediately, um, the color in his skin returned. It almost looked healthier. They said that the wrinkles in his face had completely disappeared, and he was described as having the face of an 8-year-old. So they knew something unusual was occurring, and they sought the guidance of a local lama by the name of Lama A. Kuyuga, who was the head of a local monastery. And he instructed them to place a yellow robe over the body of Khenpo Ho and to not spread the news that he had passed on. The concern was that if too many people knew, that it might, cause a disturbance. There's going to be a lot of people surrounding Khenpo Ho's house and whatnot. So they did not spread the news. So the news of his death was basically limited to a few in his inner circle. And so they followed through with this. They put a yellow robe over him. And they noticed that the bones in his extremities, in his arms and in his legs, began to shrink underneath the yellow robe. And they reported this also to the Lama, Lama A. Kuiga, who said that they are not to look under the robe, they're to leave it over the body until 7 days have passed. So they observed this. And during this time, as the days were going on, the body was continuing to shrink. In addition, they noticed that there was no odor coming from the body. Instead, a fragrant, almost perfume-like smell was emanating from it, which is a phenomena that's also known among some Catholic saints as well when they die. And they noticed that there were rainbows, like over the hermitage, that lasted for 2 days. The time when he died, the light from the sun appeared more coppery and different. And one of the practices in Tibet in these kinds of circumstances is to circumambulate or walk around the hermitage of the dead Lama. So when his disciples were doing this, they would hear music, beautiful music coming from some unknown origin. So they would hear it coming from inside the hermitage, but when they went into the house, there was no one there. So there's this mysterious angelic music that's also connected with this. And they noticed this paranormal phenomena continuing as the body continuously shrank until day 7, when they lifted the yellow robe, the body was completely gone. There was nothing left of Kenpo Ho. Now, one of the interesting questions when it comes to this is that there was no embalming process. They didn't do anything to the body. Once they noticed that the body began to look more youthful, they knew something of an extraordinary nature was occurring, so they didn't do anything else to the body. And it's strange that no odor was emitted. The shrinking was also unusual, although it remains somewhat questionable because there was no direct observation of the body as it continued to shrink. So there are certain parallels between this event and what we know of, let's say, what's recorded of the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. And Father Tiso had actually written a book on this journey, which he titled The Rainbow Body and Resurrection, Spiritual Attainment, the Dissolution of the Material Body, and the Case of Kenpo Ho, which you can purchase and read into. It's very interesting. In addition to the life of Kenpo Ho, he also goes into other things such as Dzogchen, which is this non-theistic spirituality in Tibet and China, and how actually the rainbow body phenomena, or the doctrine of the rainbow body rather, might actually be the result of, let us say, a cross evolution between Christianity and traditional Tibetan and Chinese religions. So part of the book is dedicated to analyzing how certain forms of Oriental or Syriac Christianity, which were dubbed heretical in the western part of the world, moved eastwards across the Silk Road, and how they had a particular mysticism surrounded on light phenomena, and how this may have actually contributed to the doctrine of the rainbow body, which I thought was kind of interesting. It goes on to show how religious systems are living systems that develop themselves. But Father Tiso's ultimate conclusion was a bit inconclusive, or rather, he notes that there are parallels between the two, but ultimately it's hard to define because even our understanding of what the resurrection means is a bit mysterious. You can tell St. Paul in his epistles, when he speaks of the resurrection, that he almost struggles to find words, and sometimes he uses contradictory terminology, ultimately settling for the phrase spiritual body, which is, again, it's somewhat clarifying, but also leaves a lot of ambiguity and mystery when it comes to Jesus. So there's a possible connection, but Father Tiso conservatively leaves it open, and he gives options for further studying. But I think what I found fascinating about this case is, of course, that a non Catholic had reached a very high state. And being someone that was more of a traditionalist Catholic, we have to recognize that non Christian religious systems do have certain means and paths available to them to permit their adherents to attain high statuses of spirituality. And I think just looking at Kempo Eicho's life, he must have been such a human being. He must have fulfilled what we in the Catholic tradition refer to as a saint, for him to have manifested such a miraculous sign. And so I think it's a very interesting tale, how a particular doctrine, which may have actually been the product of an evolution of a quote heretical form of Christianity interacting with Buddhist as well as Dzogchen mystical traditions that gave rise to this doctrinal idea of a rainbow body phenomena being possible, and that this cross evolution uh, opened a path for it not just being something of a theoretical nature, but of an actual nature. And I just find that to be very interesting, that kind of living manifestation of religious evolution. But what has to be interesting is that Father Tiso had interviewed a Lama who said that, the rainbow body phenomena can happen, but it's rare. The other case prior to Kempo Eicho was 150 years before him. So this is certainly not something that happens frequently. But Father Tiso asked that, if someone can actually practice to attain this, how long does it take? And he was told that it takes 60 years. So if Jesus of Nazareth did attain the rainbow body, then he would have done this in half the time, which is something worth pondering about.